Barakata Yahweh, Barakata Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Barakahak Wadash, Barakatum. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, glory, and infinite honors to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule and teach well. And peace and salutations to you, sincere Akim out there, pushing this word in truth and sincerity to the four corners of the globe. May you brothers endure until the end. This is the brother Ra'aya coming at you with another lesson. And I'll be reading from an article on buckscountybeacon.com titled, Trump Tells Military Brass We're Under Invasion from Within and U.S. cities should be training grounds for our military. We're under invasion from within, no different than a foreign enemy, but more difficult in many ways because they don't wear uniforms, Trump said. And, this was a meeting that was hosted by Trump and Secretary of War Pete Hegseth with a lot of major generals. As the title said, we're going to have to deal with enemies from within and what training grounds on the streets of the U.S. The U.S. And hey, who do you think they're talking about? Your U.S. citizens, especially your so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans who are the true children of Israel. A civil rest is coming to America, and as the way things are looking, rather quickly, because what have you also had take place? That government shutdown and the Day of Atonement, fell, upon all these things. So Yahweh Bahasham Yahweh Shai is showing major signs out here. As it says in Revelation 12, verse 12, the devil, that deceiver, Esau, Edom, the so-called white man, specifically their elites, which are pulling the strings behind the scenes, and Donald Trump is nothing more than a puppet, is coming down in great wrath because he knoweth that he hath but a short time. Esau's getting exposed at all angles, so these elites are about to pull out all the stops to bring about that NWO, that great RESET, and between them, between here and them getting there, that's going to cause a lot of bloodshed. But before I continue, I'm going to just read this quick infographic that one of the brothers posted dealing with that government shutdown, which Abaratazah, it lasts indefinitely. The U.S. government is hours away from shutting down if Congress doesn't pass a funding bill. Here's what Americans lose in a shutdown: military, paychecks stop, air travel, delays, likely, staff unpaid. Social Security, new applications delayed, health and safety, programs and food checks paused, schools and loans, new grants, stop food, programs, SNAP/WIC could run out, parks and museums closed, workers, millions unpaid or furloughed, police unpaid. So hey, that's a lot of significant things that are looking to get shaken up. And if this government shutdown, lasts for a long time, what's that going to lead to? People in a state of unrest out here, taking to the streets and protesting. And what would be the perfect thing to keep things in line? Troops on the street, boots on the ground, maintaining order. Then also what? You have ICE that's deployed to Chicago. And then, the governor down here in Louisiana has requested for, the National Guard to be deployed down here to deal with so-called crime, which, like I just said, the main targets of all these different things is going to be your so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. But let's get into this article. President Donald Trump on Tuesday proposed using American cities as training grounds for the armed forces. And I mean, what happened to Posse Comitatus? Hey, these people in the government, they're showing you damn well what they think of the Constitution. I think George W. Bush said during his presidency, the Constitution is just a piece of paper. With U.S. military might being deployed against what he described as the invasion from within. Addressing an audience of military brass abruptly summoned to Virginia, Trump outlined a muscular and at times norm-shattering view of the military's role in domestic affairs. He was joined by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, who declared an end to woke culture and announced new directives for troops that included gender-neutral or male-level standards for physical fitness. And whenever woke comes to mind, what do you think of? Liberals, especially so-called black liberals, people of color, Black Lives Matter, all those things. And also, Pete Hegseth was talking about grooming standards, keeping that face nice, clean, and shaven. Another, underhanded shot to you Israelites out there, military that like to grow that beard. The dual messages underscored the Trump administration's efforts to not only reshape contemporary Pentagon culture, but enlist military resources for the president's priorities and to everyday American civic life, including by quelling unrest and violent crime on city streets. And this meeting is really to target, U.S. citizens. Now, of course, you've got these wars brewing with Russia and China and in the Middle East. But you can look at a bunch of people that have been doing responses to this meeting with all these generals, and they're saying the same thing. The powers that be know that unrest is coming to the streets of America, so they're doing everything they can to prepare accordingly. But first and foremost, we know according to biblical prophecy that there will be civil war on the streets of America. This is 2 Esdras chapter 15 in the Apocrypha. I'm going to start at verse 14. Woe to the world and them that dwell therein, for the sword and their destruction draweth nigh, and one people shall stand up and fight against another. That goes into many things. One race against another, race wars, one political class against another, civil unrest, average everyday citizens going against those in the government, civil war, citizen versus non-citizen, soldier versus citizen, etc., etc. And one people shall stand up and fight against another, and swords in their hands. And that modern day sword, especially in America, is going to be that gun, which there's more guns than people in this country. I think they said for every, U.S. citizen, there's 1.5 guns, but that's not including illegal guns, 3D printed or ghost guns, all these things. Verse 16, for there shall be sedition among men and invading one another. And the definition for sedition is conduct or speech inciting open rebellion against a ruling authority or monarch, which we can already see a bunch of people starting to come against Donald Trump's presidency. And what were they talking about at that meeting? That the streets of America should be used as a training ground for the military. And, that's a veiled way of saying, look, we expect unrest due to people going against our policies, so we have to have boots on the ground to quell it. They shall not regard their kings nor princes, and your modern day kings and princes are those in the government, mayor, governor, senators, presidents, as well as the authorities that uphold the system like the police or the military. And you see a lot of people bucking up against ICE as well, but it says they shall not regard them. It's going to get to a point to where people aren't going to care whether you've got a suit and a tie, a badge, or a uniform. As it says, in the course of their actions shall stand in their power. Hey, people are going to get it how they live. Verse 17, a man shall desire to go into a city and shall not be able. And what does that sound like? A state of martial law where things are locked down due to some extreme crisis, and you have to have the right identification to move about freely. And we saw what just happened over in the UK, and I believe Switzerland's doing the same thing as well, pushing for a mandatory digital ID, which is coming to America too. For because of their pride, the city shall be troubled, The houses shall be destroyed, and men shall be afraid. Chaos on the streets, death and destruction. Again, what did Donald Trump say? That these U.S. streets should be used as a training ground for the military. And the military isn't meant to police citizens. The military is meant to fight wars. We should use some of these dangerous cities as training grounds for our military, Trump said. He noted at another point, we're under invasion from within, no different than a foreign enemy, but more difficult in many ways because they don't wear uniforms. Another veiled threat at you U.S. citizens. Hegseth called hundreds of military leaders and their top advisors from around the world to the Marine Corps base in Quantico without publicly revealing the reason. His address largely focused on his own long-used talking points that painted a picture of a military that has been hamstrung by woke policies. And he said military leaders should do the honorable thing and resign if they don't like his new approach. And if you go watch that speech, when Donald Trump opened up, he was pretty much saying, look, you don't want to get in line with things, and you can resign. So that's a threat at the military brass as well. And Pete Hegseth threw a shot at General Mark Miley. So there's another part of sedition you're going to see, not just citizens, in a seditious spirit against the government, but you're going to have fractions within the U.S. government, within the military, with those that are loyal to Trump, following after him. And then you're going to see those in the military, go against the Trump administration as well. So civil unrest within the military too. It's about to be a free-for-all out here. Which brings me to Isaiah chapter 19, verse 2. And I will set the Egyptians against the Egyptians. And this is speaking about the spiritual Egyptians as pursuant to Revelation 11, verse 8. These Americans, especially these Edomite Americans who can see that they're losing, their beloved America and getting ready to fight to bring back the America they envision, whether on the left or the right. And I will set the Egyptians against the Egyptians, Americans against Americans, and they shall fight, everyone against his brother and everyone against his neighbor, city against city and kingdom against kingdom. A free-for-all between Americans from all walks of life and institutions, even within the government and the military. But now I'm going to jump down to verse 4. And the Egyptians will I give over into the hand of a cruel Lord, and a fierce king shall rule over them, saith the Lord, Yahweh of hosts. And, with all these policies he's been passing, we've got this government shutdown now. And as we're reading about that fiery talk in that speech to those generals, it's looking like Donald Trump is very well this fierce king and that cruel Lord set over Egypt or America to bring this whole thing down. And what's interesting is, I would recommend you sincere Akim and Akwat out there, go back and watch that movie Civil War from 2024. And I remember when the brothers and myself went to see it, at first it wasn't, at least it wasn't what I expected. I expected something closer to Bushwick, but, it was a lot of, a lot of talking, a lot of scenes and stuff like that. But fast forward to here in 2025 with a lot of things that have taken place within that short amount of time, the movie was very cryptic in what they were saying. And a lot of that stuff, can line up with what's taking place now. And, the gist of what kicked off the Civil War was, the president, which, when you look at the actor, he looks a lot like J.D. Vance, in my opinion. He ran illegally for a third term. And what have you heard Donald Trump, talking about and his followers? Well, some of them, him running for a third term. He disbanded the FBI, taking away government agencies that would go against, the power of the president. Donald Trump wanted to fire one of those people in the Federal Reserve because the jobs numbers that came back didn't reflect good on how he was handling the economy. And then one of the third things, the main characters were saying they wanted to ask the president when they interviewed him is, why did you authorize airstrikes against U.S. citizens? And what did Trump say? U.S. cities being used as training grounds for the military. A revelation of the method by the elites, showing you, where they would ultimately like to take things. Though meetings between military brass and civilian leaders are nothing new, this gathering had fueled intense speculation about its purpose, given the haste with which it was called and the mystery surrounding it. The fact that admirals and generals from conflict zones were summoned for a lecture on race and gender in the military showed the extent to which the country's culture wars had become a front and center agenda item for Hegseth's Pentagon, even at a time of broad national security concerns across the globe. Race and gender in the culture war, and again that term woke, which, with the social engineering and propaganda, when you hear those terms, what comes to mind? Black people, people of color, the Black Lives Matter, which, that has nothing to do with the average everyday lives of, you so-called Negroes. But that's the picture they want to paint. And like I've been saying, all these things are ultimately going to be targeted against you Israelites. And look at ICE. Who are they going after? The Northern Kingdom, so-called Latinos and Native Americans. And now, as brothers have been saying for these last couple of months, they're pivoting it towards the Southern Kingdom, you so-called Negroes, with this crime problem and the need to put National Guard boots on the ground to stop it. Even though when you look at statistics, crime has been so-called going down. The Northern Kingdom gets it first. The Southern Kingdom gets it the worst. We will not be politically correct. Trump is used to boisterous crowds of supporters who laugh at his jokes and applaud his boasts during his speeches, but he wasn't getting that kind of soundtrack from the military leaders in attendance because, when you look at the beginning of Trump's opening statements, he was giving veiled threats to them. If you don't want to get on board with my agenda, you can leave. You can lose your rank, your office, all that stuff. In keeping with the nonpartisan tradition of the armed services, the military leaders sat mostly stone-faced through Trump's politicized remarks, a contrast from when rank-and-file soldiers cheered during Trump's speech at Fort Bragg this summer. During his nearly hour-long speech, Hegseth said the U.S. military has promoted too many leaders for the wrong reasons based on race, gender quotas, and historic firsts. The era of politically correct, overly sensitive, don't hurt anyone's feelings leadership ends right now at every level, Hegseth said. That was echoed by Trump, who said the purpose of America military is not to protect anyone's feelings, it's to protect our republic. We will not be politically correct when it comes to defending American freedom, Trump said, and we will be a fighting and a winning machine. Remember, the U.S. military should use the streets of America as a training ground. Look at this chicken hawk right here. Yeah, I'll just read these last few paragraphs and we'll get back in these precepts. Senator Jack Reed, the top Democrat on the Senate Armed Services Committee, called the meeting an expensive, dangerous dereliction of leadership by the Trump administration. Even more troubling was Mr. Hegseth's ultimatum to America's senior officers: conform to his political worldview or step aside. Reed said in a statement, that demand is profoundly dangerous. It signals that partisan loyalty, loyalty to the party matters more than capability, judgment, or service to the Constitution, undermine the principles of a professional nonpartisan military. So like I've been saying throughout the video, a lot of veiled threats were given to the military brass saying, look, if you don't want to go along, you can get out. So going back to 2nd Esdras 15 and 16, that's going to lead to sedition and not regarding kings or princes, not just amongst the average everyday citizens, but among those in the government and military institutions as well, leading to Egyptians fighting against Egyptians, brother against brother, city against city, neighbor against neighbor. And what's interesting is I'm gonna go to this Wikipedia page on Emperor Nero, which we believe that Nero is Trump in the Trump is Nero in the reincarnation, because when you look at the things they did as the leaders of their empires, there's a lot of overlap. That Venn diagram, which go around a little bit. Salakia. All right. This is under the section Decline. Nero lost all sense of right and wrong and listened to flattery with total credulity after Agrippina, which I believe was his mother's death. And, when his mother was alive, she was, guiding him in a lot of his policies. But as it says, after his mother's death, it said he lost all sense of right and wrong and listened to flattery and total credulity. And what's Donald Trump known for doing? Having his ears open to those who flatter his ego, and those that go against it or what he wants to do, he gives them the axe. And another thing, Nero wanted to be a celebrity. He spent a lot of time at the gladiatorial games. He mingled amongst actors and stuff like that in Rome. He thought he was a musician and liked to play the flute, which the Emperor Titus, or he was a general at the time, Titus Vespasian, fell asleep during one of his performances because it was so boring. And what's Trump known for? He wants to be a celebrity, seen amongst those that are famous in society. And again, Trump likes to have his ego fed. Now let's go to another thing. You had the Great Fire of Rome, which Nero blamed on the Christians back then, which we know Trump is going to be coming against the Israelites, the true Christians today. But in this last paragraph, the cost to rebuild Rome was immense, requiring funds the state treasury did not have. To find the necessary funds for reconstruction, Nero's government increased taxation. Think about that big, beautiful bill, which, in the beginning months of his administration, he had Doge, the Department of Government Efficiency, to cut down on unnecessary costs. But then with the big, beautiful bill, that added even more billions of dollars, to, the government, which is going to further, devalue the currency. Particularly, heavy tributes were imposed on provinces of the empire. To meet at least a portion of the costs, Nero devalued the Roman currency, which we can see something similar about to take place with what? The Genius Act, which is instituting those stable coins where $1 is pegged to one stable coin. And you've got a lot of, economists and financial experts saying that they're going to start with, having a stable coin to where it's 1-to-1, but then getting to the point to where they're just going to, create even more stable coins and put any value of US dollars they want to it, further devaluing the currency. To meet at least a portion of the costs, Nero devalued the Roman currency, increasing inflationary pressures for the first time in the empire's history. And we can see with his tariffs and trade wars, prices are going up, and this cost of living crisis is getting out of hand. With the job I deal with, I heard from two different sources that people are looking for an alternative to the products we sell because the prices are just too much, or just sending products back because it's too expensive. But now I'm going to read in the later years. Well, actually, I'll go down to revolt of Vindex and Galba and Nero's death. And you're going to see towards the end of Nero's rule, generals started rebelling against him. In March 68, Gaius Julius Vindex, the governor of Gallia Lugdunensis, rebelled against Nero's tax policies. Lucius Virginius Rufus, the governor of Germania Superior, was ordered to put down Vindex's rebellion. In an attempt to gain support from outside his own province, Vindex called upon Servius Sulpicius Galba, the governor of Hispania Tarraconensis, to join the rebellion and to declare himself emperor in opposition to Nero, which led to the Year of the Three Emperors. After the Battle of Vesantio in March 68, Virginius's forces easily defeated those of Vindex, and the latter committed suicide. However, after defeating the rebel, Virginius's legions attempted to proclaim their commander as emperor. Virginius refused to act against Nero, but the discontent of the legions of Germania and the continued opposition of Galba in Hispania did not bode well for him. And you had a lot of those Roman soldiers pledge their allegiance to Galba instead of to the emperor. And like I was saying earlier, you're going to see a lot of those in the military turn against, the government, and the soldiers under their command are going to pledge allegiance to their generals or their leaders and not to the president or his administration. Everything written aforetime was written for our learning. Nothing new under the sun. There shall be sedition amongst men and invading one another. They shall not regard their kings nor princes. While Nero had retained some control of the situation, support for Galba increased despite his being officially declared a public enemy. The prefect of the Praetorian Guard, Gaius Nymphidius Sabinus, also abandoned his allegiance to the emperor and came out in support of Galba. And if you know about the Praetorian Guard, which was the emperor's personal bodyguard, they had a saying, the Praetorian Guard picked the emperor. A lot of emperors were assassinated by the Praetorian Guard, and new emperors set up that was for their own best interest. In response, Nero fled Rome with the intention of going to the port of Ostia, and from there to take a fleet to one of the still loyal eastern provinces. A sedition against Nero's rule, forcing him to, have to flee. According to Suetonius, Nero abandoned the idea when some army officers openly refused to obey his commands. Nero then toyed with the idea of fleeing to Parthia, throwing himself upon the mercy of Galba, or appealing to the people and begging them to pardon him for his past offenses, and if he could not soften their hearts, to entreat them at least to allow him the prefecture of Egypt. Suetonius reports that the text of this speech was later found in Nero's writing desk, but that he dared not give it from fear of being torn to pieces before he could reach the forum. Nero returned to Rome and spent the evening in the palace. After sleeping, he awoke at about midnight to find the palace guard had left, dispatching messages to his friends' palace chambers for them to come. He received no answers. Upon going to their chambers personally, he found them all abandoned. When he called for a gladiator or anyone else adept with a sword to kill him, no one appeared. He cried, "Have I neither friend nor foe?" and ran out as if to throw himself into the Tiber. Returning, Nero sought a place where he could hide and collect his thoughts. An imperial freedman, Phaon, offered his villa. Traveling in disguise, Nero and 4 loyal freedmen, Epaphroditus, Phaon, Neophytus, and Sporus, reached the villa, where Nero ordered them to dig a grave for him. At this time, Nero learned that the Senate had declared him a public enemy. And you've got these different, congressmen and senators, and even world leaders outside of America, coming against Trump. Somebody at a recent United Nations meeting compared him to Hitler. People are saying, look at what he's doing. He's having a bunch of overreach to try to make himself the dictator. Nero prepared himself for suicide, pacing up and down, muttering, "Qualis artifex perio," which is Latin for "what an artist the world is losing." Nero saw himself as an artist, and Trump sees himself as a celebrity. Losing his nerve, he begged one of his companions to set an example by killing himself first. At last, the sound of approaching horsemen drove Nero to face his end. However, he still could not bring himself to take his own life, but instead forced his private secretary. And what is Pete Hegseth? The Secretary of War. Hey, Epaphroditus could very well be, Pete Hegseth could be Epaphroditus in the reincarnation to perform the task. So, So Nero, he committed suicide. And, as we just read throughout some of that information, Nero was prone to flattery and personal adulations, which dictated his decisions on things. He led to the devalue of the Roman currency, first in the empire. And he had, a lot of his generals and those in the Senate or the government turn against him. And we're seeing very similar parallels to Donald Trump. Now, how Donald Trump goes out remains to be seen. Just a little bit of history, some food for thought. But now, let me see. I'll reread these last 2 paragraphs. Hegseth's speech came as the country faces a potential government shutdown this week, and as he has taken several unusual and unexplained actions, including ordering cuts to the number of general officers and firings of other top military leaders. Again, if you don't want to get in line, you can get out, and you can lose your rank and your position, which is going to rub a lot of those in the military the wrong way and lead to what? Sedition, disregarding kings and princes. Trump also said the military's focus should be on the Western Hemisphere, over here on the home front. His administration championed the military's role in securing the U.S.-Mexico border, deploying to American cities as part of Trump's law enforcement surges, and carrying out strikes on boats in the Caribbean that it says targeted drug traffickers. That's it with this article. But hey, things are moving very quickly out here. That devil is really about to show his horns to you American citizens, but chiefly you Israelites, which, let's go to 2nd Esdras chapter 16. I'm going to read verses 70 to 72. For there shall be in every place and in the next cities a great insurrection upon those that fear the Lord, you Israelites. And this is going to come upon the whole nation, because even though, 2/3 of our people are wicked, they still have some, belief or understanding of a higher power. As it says in Romans chapter 10, they have a zeal, but not according to knowledge. But as it said, there shall be in every place and in the next cities a great insurrection upon those that fear the Lord. And where have they talked about sending these troops? Washington, D.C., Chicago, you know, Oakland over in California, and to New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and Shreveport down here into Louisiana. And who makes up, you know, a large percentage of the population there? You Israelites, so-called Negroes especially. Got a lot of Latinos there, you know, Native Americans, a lot of them are on these reservations. But Israelites, regardless, they shall be like madmen, sparing none, but still spoiling and destroying those that fear the Lord. As Trump said, these American cities, these streets should be used as training grounds for the military, for they shall waste and take away their goods and cast them out of their houses. And we're seeing ICE already do that with you, Northern Kingdom, showing up on the jobs and arresting you, showing up to your houses and dragging you out and sending you to a detention center. This is Ezekiel chapter 21. I'm going to start at verse 9. Son of man, prophesy and say, thus saith Yahweh, say, a sword is sharpened and also furbished. It is sharpened to make a sore slaughter. It is furbished that it may glitter. Should we then make mirth? It contemneth the rod of my son as every tree. And you have the prophets out here telling you that good times are over, that it's only bad times, Jacob's trouble coming down the pipeline. But for 2/3 of our people, they still want to be in that mirthful spirit, thinking things are going to get better, especially now going into these holiday seasons and football season. And he hath given it to be furbished that it may be handled. The sword is sharpened and it is furbished to give it into the hand of the slayer. And when you read Psalms chapter 17, verse 13, it says that the wicked is the sword of the Lord, and the wicked, as pursuant to Malachi 1, verse 4, is the Edomites. So this slayer, whom this great sword is going to be given into the hands of to make that sore slaughter, is Esau, Edom. And as we're seeing, the main target is going to be who? Cry and howl, son of man, for it shall be upon my people. It shall be upon all the princes of Israel. Terrors by reason of the sword shall be upon my people. Smite therefore upon the thigh. There shall be great insurrection upon those that fear the Lord, and they shall be like madmen, sparing none, but still spoiling and destroying. And just as there were a lot of similarities between Nero's life in the past and Donald Trump's life today, according to history, there's a lot of similarities to what the Roman Edomites did to Israel in the past and what these Roman American Edomites are about to do to you Israelites today. This is Luke chapter 19. I'm going to start at verse 41. And this is, Yahushai, the Son of the Most High, whom the world ignorantly refers to as so-called Jesus speaking. And what he was referring to was a future event, 70 AD, which happened, I believe, about 30 to 40 years, after his death. And what took place during 70 AD, due to the Israelites not wanting to pay taxes to the Romans, which it began with Nero, funnily enough, but later down to General and then later Emperor Titus Vespasian sending a Roman army to Judea and surrounding them and destroying, them in the Second Temple. And when he was come near, he beheld the city and wept over it, saying, if thou hadst known, even thou, at least in this thy day, the things which belong unto thy peace, taking heed to his words. And it's no different today. You have the prophets out here preaching the words of Yahweh Bahashem, Yahushai, which are going to be your peace and your salvation with these terrible things coming down the line. But as the majority of our people didn't listen to Yahushai back then, they're not listening to him through his men today either. But now they are hid from thine eyes. And another thing that's coming down the pipeline is the famine of the word, which, we can see that's coming with this whole situation with Captain Kirk calling for censorship of hate speech. And then, you've got Larry Ellis and Oracle and that new TikTok that's about to come into place, where you have American and Israeli algorithms that are going to be used on it to look for hate speech and anti-simulationism to censor it. Hey, we're not going to be on the highways and byways preaching for too much longer, and these video epistles are not going to be online for too much longer. So drink from these rivers of living waters while you still can. Verse 43, for the days shall come upon thee that thine enemies shall cast a trench about thee. Think about 2 Esdras 15. A man shall desire to go into a city and shall not be able to. Lockdowns, martial law, and compass thee round and keep thee in on every side. And you know, as myself and other brothers have said in multiple videos, if you notice, wherever you Israelites' neighborhoods are, there are train tracks. Why? You can cut off transportation with train tracks and what? Put people onto those trains to send them to detention centers easily, and compass thee round about on every side and keep thee in, and shall lay thee even with the ground, and thy children within thee, putting down men, women, children, pregnant women, that sword being used by the slayer to make a great slaughter, and they shall not leave in thee one stone upon another, and they shall cast them out of their houses and take away their goods, because thou knewest not the time of thy visitation. Which again, you've got the men of the Lord, while this word and ministry is still freely available, warning you of the terrible times to come. But as it says in 2 Esdras chapter 9, they spent this time of liberty to scoff at the word and casted it behind their backs. But hey, they shall know it after death by pain, that a prophet had been among them. But that's it with this video. With this video, I hope you sincere Akim and Akwath were edified. Just keep strong. We are almost out of this final wicked captivity of the heathen nations, chiefly of the Edomites. And as always, I'm going to say Abad Babul, Kwam Yash.